Warning. This video is pretty much one big flashing light. If you are sensitive to that, please don't watch. You can totally listen to it while you stare at a wall, though. Actually, maybe everyone should do that. This run gave me a headache. Hellfire Tincture. Ignite all characters within 15 meters. Deal 5% of your maximum health per second as burning to yourself. The burn is 0.5 times stronger on allies and 24 times stronger on enemies. As long as you can survive the 5% health loss per second, it deals a decent amount of damage to everything around you. Using the item's Repulsion Armor Plate to reduce the burning damage and Planula to heal from the burns will completely remove the downside of this item. Add on some Razor Wire, which fires off damaging needles every time you get hurt, and you have a completely safe source of extra damage. But that's not extreme, that's safe. This is extreme. Let me explain. The first goal when powering up the tincture was making sure it had 100% uptime. The key item here is Gesture of the Drowned. Hellfire Tincture lasts for 15 seconds, but has a 45-second cooldown, meaning things aren't on fire for 30 out of every 45-second rotation. Gesture of the Drowned reduces this cooldown by 50%, from 45 seconds to 23. Further stacks reduce the cooldown by a further 15%, so with 2 copies of this item, you can cut the 45-second cooldown by 65%, which rounds to 15 seconds. In addition, Gesture automatically triggers your equipment off cooldown, meaning even without your input, you now have a 100% uptime on Hellfire Tincture. But as you can see in this footage, I decided 100% uptime was not enough. In addition to the 50% reduction from Gesture of the Drowned, I used 9 copies of Soulbound Catalyst. This item reduces equipment cooldown by 4 seconds every time you kill an enemy. Having 9 of this item increases the effect to a 20-second cooldown reduction on Hellfire Tincture's 23-second cooldown. With this, every 2 kills will instantly cause Tincture to activate again, spreading more fire which kills more enemies in a self-perpetuating cycle of flaming death. But what purpose does this serve? Activating the Tincture repeatedly only resets the 15-second duration of the fire aura, meaning activating the equipment multiple times within a 15-second period doesn't change the effects at all. The reason for the repeated activation is travel. In order for the Tincture to do its job, you need to be close to the enemy. This is fine when it comes to enemies on the ground, but navigating the 3rd dimension to reach those in the air can prove tricky. One of the easiest solutions to this problem is Volcanic Egg, an equipment which lets you, for 5 seconds, fly around in any direction you desire. It does this by turning you into a ball of fire, which fits too well with the Tincture thematically for me to ignore. However, characters can only hold one equipment at a time, with the exception of multi, so how can I utilize both equipment at once? The solution comes in the form of Bottled Chaos, another thematically fitting item for this run. With this item, every time you activate your equipment, one of 20 different equipment effects gets activated as well. Most of these are pointless, especially those which summon allies which get burned by the Tincture instantly upon being summoned, but the 1 in 20 chance to trigger the Volcanic Egg is worth it. With 4 copies of Bottled Chaos, your odds increase from a 5% chance to trigger the egg to 20% every single time the Tincture is activated. This means as long as you are actively killing enemies, the uptime of Volcanic Egg should be near 100%, giving you completely free movement through all 3 dimensions. But forget that, we still haven't dealt with the main drawback of the item, the fact that you are on fire. Earlier in the run, the 8 stacks of Ben's Raincoat, an item which can nullify a debuff once every 5 seconds while providing a shield, kept me safe from even being set on fire in the first place. But once I started triggering the Tincture far more than 8 times in just 2 seconds, I needed a new plan. While the previously mentioned use of Planula and Repulsion Armor Plates would do this perfectly fine in most situations, I'd made the decision to pick up 10 copies of Ignition Tank, an item which quadruples the damaging effects of fire. 10 copies of this item increase fire damage by 3000%, taking the initial 5% of your health per second in self-damage and increasing it to 155% of your health every second. Feel free to check my math, it's probably wrong. It would take a ridiculous amount of the previously mentioned items to cancel this out, so I settled for the significantly more entertaining option, just out-healing the thousands of burn damage per second. While I had several sources of healing, the most visually apparent and effective one was Interstellar Desk Plant. The 7 stacks of this item I possessed are responsible for the countless green circles that are giving half of you watching a horrible headache right now. Killing an enemy will cause one of those circles to appear for 10 seconds, and standing within those circles, if you can even figure out where that is, heals you for 10% of your health per second. While there are an admittedly ridiculous number of them due to all the dying enemies, you would need to be within 16 overlapping circles at once to just barely keep up with the fire, and that kind of precise movement is tricky when you're constantly transforming into a blazing ball of fire that doesn't know how to sit still, not to mention the enemies you are constantly trying to dodge. There are 2 methods I use to increase this healing. The obvious one is Rejuvenation Rack, an item which simply increases all healing by 100% per stack, meaning my 3 stacks of this item reduce the required number of overlapping heal circles from 16 to 4. While this was likely enough on its own, the real helpers were the 21, later 37, stacks of Aegis. The original purpose of this item was to turn any extra healing into shields, with a starting rate of 50% of the extra healing being converted. However, every additional Aegis increased this rate by another 50%, meaning the 21 stacks of this item would multiply every point of extra healing by 10.5 times. Almost certain this math is wrong actually, but who cares. This reduces the required number of healing circles from 4 to 0.375. I am absolutely certain this math is wrong, I literally just guessed. What matters is that it's less than 1, meaning standing in just a single one of these countless green circles will completely counter the effects of the fire, and give me extra shields in the process. And that's the run. There's a lot more going on, of course. As long as you're not looking at a wall like the warning recommended, you can see the missiles constantly being fired off, the angry purple friends I keep summoning and setting on fire, the way jumps will send me rocketing into the atmosphere seemingly at random, but I'm not going to explain every last item interaction at play here. That could take all day. Unless you guys really like this, of course, in which case I will take that as full permission to turn every interesting Risk of Rain 2 run I have into its own little video, and it will take over my channel. But hey, odds are nobody's even making it this far in the video, so if someone is, by some miracle, hearing this part, thanks for sticking through the whole thing. I'm making these videos for myself, but that doesn't mean seeing funny numbers go up doesn't give me a good dose of dopamine. So yeah, thanks for watching, or listening, and that'll be all. See ya.